And we're live in three, two, and welcome everybody to the debut episode for season 3 of the Planetmullins podcast. Glad to have everybody here, and thanks for so many people viewing the show since its inception. Today I have an amazing writer. He's they call him a lot of different things, jazz journalist and PR person, and all around good guy that I've known a really long time. Please say hello, folks, to Mr. Jonathan Widran.
Thank you very much, and thanks for pronouncing it correctly. Even after many years, some people still get it wrong, so I appreciate it.
Well, and you being a writer and everything, and words and spelling is kind of your craft. It's got to be really annoying when people call you something. Well, how do they screw it up? Widreen or
They add an L, Wildren, Wibren, or sometimes they'll just pronounce the I like it's Spanish, like Widran. So it's just funny because people put an L there. It's like all these L's. My family we make a joke of it, but it's because my dad gets that too. That's his last name first too.
Right.
So, but anyway, it's fun. Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. Well, it's an honor and a pleasure to have you here. And apparently, I'm not the only Jonathan Widran fan out there because the Huffington Post, of all people, printed this on their website about you. Jonathan Widran is a veteran music, entertainment, and business news journalist who has been a regular contributor, feature writer, and columnist for more than 15 years to numerous publications and websites, including Music Connection, Jazz Is, All Music Guide, Wine and Jazz, Downbeat, Amazon.com, and the Los Angeles Times. Wow, you're kind of big time now, aren't you?
Yeah, sometimes if you write a few things for someone, you get it on the resume and it looks really cool. But there are some regular gigs. Like the foundation of like all the writing, the freelance writing I do is, which I still am involved. I still Jazz Is and Music Connection for like so long that if I tell young people that I'm interviewing how long they would be older than them. So but those are like long term, and some of the other ones, things kind of have come and gone. Like even All Music Guide, which is a very important thing that people quote like in Wikipedia and everything. They're like about 10 years. So what happens in this world is like you get gigs, like a musician, you have a gig at a place and a regular thing, and then things transition and change. But there are some that are mainstays, and those are very important. And I built from there.
Well, my dad was a newspaper guy, and he actually was a copy editor at the LA Times when I was a kid. And so the LA Times has a lot of cachet with me because, personal affiliation. Plus, it's one of the most important surviving newspapers in the world.
Yeah, it is. I still read it every day on the phone. So I know.
Reading it on the phone.
My credit there is quite a long time ago, but it certainly looks good on the resume. I'll always use it. It's a long time ago.
There's nothing wrong with the credits, but I mean, your credits, you have so many. I don't think we have a long enough show to read all of your credits.
You don't need to. It's like you've been around a long time. You just keep going and do a lot of work. So
well, it seems to me like having known you all the way back to my Fifth Gear album in 1988, when you're writing PR stuff for Nova Records. One thing that I always noticed about you over all these years is that somehow you always seem to just not have the writer persona. Like you just, when people think about writers, like I think about Stephen King, who said, I have the heart of a young boy in a jar on my desk, and you think he's by himself. And J.K. Rowling, who wrote all the Harry Potter stuff, she looks a little dubious and a little lonely to me. But you've always been so personable and so nice. You don't fit the stereotype.
Well, the other thing that was always important to me, I never liked the word when I heard the word critic because it always makes you sound like you're some crusty person writing nasty stuff. And I know he's a legend, but when I first started, Leonard Feather, the famous jazz critic and musician, was alive, and he wrote something that I could never write, but it was really funny about two of your contemporaries. He wrote in a review of, and I loved David Benoit and I loved Brandon Fields. They were like my heroes in the beginning, right? and he
Right.
writes, "This is like the bland leading the bland," and I thought it was hilarious, and they did too. But like you would never see that. I like an upbeat guy. I just, it's so I just think I'm a person that loves the music and just wants to share the magic of it. I'm not the musician making it, but I'm the person that wants people to love it like I do. That's kind of how I see my work.
I actually knew Leonard quite well. We used to do lectures at Colorado University, and when he heard the jazz record, he said, Rob Mullins is destined for international celebrity. And that's a quote that I can still use because that was in the LA Times too, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. And
But
that had that your famous song "Parking in Westwood," which has never really gotten better. I know businesses come and go,
the
but
parking is
I
so
remember that album well. Yeah,
yeah, the parking is still so much worse now than it was. And I remember I
I
went
know.
to WLOQ in Florida back when MF Kirshner ran the station and the whole contemporary jazz radio thing was getting going. And they
Yeah,
had jazz on an LP there. And I walked in to do my interview, and the album cover was laying there, and there was a big red X through the song Parking in Westwood, and it said on there, "Do not play ever, you will be fired."
that's really funny. By the way, you released that album, the Fifth Gear in '88, and I first started doing all this in '89. So for me, it was like an '80, like that was sort of that transitional time. But that was it's still those albums from the early days really are the ones that when I hear them, I just get very warm-hearted and sentimental because those really got me excited about the genre, and I didn't know I was going to have a career writing about it, but it obviously sparked it. So you're one of those guys that I consider like like one of the early heroes that got me excited about this
Well,
music.
that's good, man, because I would hate to be the bland leading the bland. so, so
May
now,
Leonard rest in peace. Whatever he's doing now, he's probably just driving people crazy with that wit. I love it though. I love what he did. And
well,
Lucille
yeah.
Hunt, who years ago, was a manager and everything and worked for labels. She said to me, she says, "You could be like the Leonard Feather of contemporary jazz." I'm like, I think that's really nice, especially since she said it when I was like 26 years old and I was like just starting. But
Right.
I think that was a high honor because he was such a legendary person in his way. So that was really good. I only do that to say that it was like I didn't want to be a guy knocking too much. I just that's not my nature. You
No,
know.
I always, and I'm not saying this in a negative way. I always thought you were too nice to be a writer, and that was,
Yeah.
I think that's another common kind of bonding point that you and I have together. I've never mentioned this to you, but my first review when it came out in the LA Times when I came from Denver to LA and I played a gig is that I was the incessantly grinning Mullins, smiling too much, and
Yeah.
befuddled by technology, or something like that.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. You're an upbeat guy too, and when I've seen the difference between contemporary, which when it became smooth jazz, the big stars in that versus straight ahead, like you could watch Terrence Blanchard or Miles in his day or Herbie even. They're all geniuses, but sometimes they'll just sit and play and they won't even engage the audience. Whereas when you get like a Dave Koz or Rick Braun or Peter White, these guys are good musicians. Their music is more poppy, but they want you to have a party. They're smiling, they're happy, they want to uplift. The other guys, it's more about the heavier art stuff. And I think there's an audience for both, but I have noticed that as a difference. It's more you're like an entertainer and you share joy, and the other guys are more like more cerebral, I guess. No
Well,
less brilliant, but they're still, they're not as they don't need to smile. They just do their thing.
well,
They just go, ooh.
yeah. There's a grimness and kind of a smug, weird, dark artsy side to the New York straight ahead jazz thing that I always was kind of not able to understand. I mean, and I'm not going to diss Dexter Gordon here, but there was a movie made about Dexter Gordon and all of the problems that he had when he was, New York jazz guy, and he had these issues. He couldn't get paid, and then he had a drug problem, and he had relationship issues, and New York is cold and dark and all these things. And I remember thinking to myself when that movie came out, I was really young, and I thought, well, that's kind of on him in a way. Like he could just, put away the heroin and just show up for the gig on time, finish the gig on time, go home
Yeah,
and have a sandwich. I mean, you could, but it's just not how that
yeah,
worked. I mean, those guys,
yeah.
especially in that era of straight ahead, where everybody was doing a lot of drugs and miles,
Right.
train and all that.
That's one thing about this contemporary jazz, which became smooth jazz, but whatever. It was still contemporary back in when you started in the '80s. I never got the sense that everyone was strung out on anything, and if they were, they kept it very well hidden because everyone seemed like they were high on life, so to speak. Like the
Right.
music was joy, that it was like a joyful thing. Whatever problems, they never brought their problems to the forefront if they had any behind the scenes. So I always, and I that's probably what I like, because you seek that. So that's probably what I love so much. It made you feel good, and there was an artistic quality to it, but it was not like there wasn't all the baggage of the storytelling about the guy's life, that the tragedy that grew
Right.
out. It was all from a good vibes.
Well, the tragedies are with everybody, and people
Yeah,
a lot of times will be watching my Facebook and Instagram feeds, and they're like, "You live the most perfect life. It's so easy, and you're cooking your own
yeah,
like mushroom green pepper salad, and you're always at the beach canals." And
yeah.
it's kind of like,
Facebook is great for creating imagery of like what the perfect life for yourself. And behind the scenes, I know people that do this, and the reality is much darker. But they show you, and you always gonna be jealous. You always want to be where they're at, and it's just hilarious because it's always like the world you want to present to people, and then the dark stuff. I'm not gonna, but and other people spend the time bitching every day about something else, and so you feel like the real personality can shine through. It's
well, that's
but it's
I've always noticed that about your writing is that you're so, for not being a quote unquote critic, you're still very supportive to the artists that you write about and really passionate
yeah.
about it. How many articles have you done by now? Do you have any idea?
Oh, it's literally between articles, reviews, bios, which are used, for promotional purposes,
All
and
right.
one sheets and press release and all that. But I mean, document wise, over 30 years, I mean, literally thousands and thousands and thousands. I mean, several thousand. I haven't added it up, but it's thousands of them. I'm sure by now, because it's just I do keep track in the last years about just for financial purposes. I make a list of everything, but I haven't over the years count, but definitely in the thousands. It's just because it's
That's
an ongoing flow. I don't even keep track of it.
right. Well, I think it's pretty amazing that you've lasted this many years. Now, did you have to have other jobs to keep going?
Yeah, in the beginning, I didn't have a real job. I did a lot of I did a lot of home tutoring and that sort of stuff, and worked at different more education. I kind of missed that because I'd go to the kids' houses and they'd feed you, and they'd in the '90s they'd listen to Biggie and Tupac, and they were these suburban kids getting into all this cool music, so it kept me kind of younger as I was getting a little older. But it was more those kind of jobs and stuff, and then eventually there came a point when like 20 some years ago where it just was enough to live modestly. I wasn't rolling in dough, but it was really good, and I was like, this is all I think I need to be doing. And as I've gotten older these last couple of years, it just like doesn't stop. I mean, I'm so locked in, and the key is to keep like rolling with it. As certain companies and play things go by the wayside, new things come up. So that's
Right.
that's the thing, rolling if different opportunities come up, and hopefully it just keeps, but it's just mostly word of mouth. So it's been really, I mean, it's a blessing, but it can be kind of chaotic, but in a good way. Like I'm happy about it, but after a while, like, won't they ever stop? And I don't want them to stop, but then it's like I just need to breathe sometimes. It gets a little much. It's funny.
Well, I think out of the writers that are out there that are still doing this, you're one of the more popular ones, and some of the
Yeah.
phrases that you've come up with descriptively are kind of ingenious. I mean, did that come from your English background at UCLA, or how do you come up with these phrases?
I think it's just kind of like you guys with music. You channel the muse, if you want to call that God, divinity, or just from the universe, wherever you're sort of. It's just something you're gifted with, wherever it comes from. It's very mysterious, and all of a sudden something will just come to you. Why that's important though is you remember our old friend Dan Margulies, who started writing at the same time, and we both got into it together, and we encouraged each other. We were old friends. He made fun of me because in my very first reviews in LA jazz scene, I wrote about Greg Karukas stuff like "run, don't walk" or "oh, Brandon." I wrote like really stupid cliche. Like Bill Cantos, another one of your colleagues, great musician. He said to me, "You're getting better as a writer. You used to write like Nito, and you're just getting a little deeper." So in the beginning, I was like the kid in the candy store writing whatever and then over time I got to be better. And that sometimes it was some editors and some people telling me like in jazz they had some really tough editors that said you're writing a lot of fluffy stuff, make it a little tighter. And I think that even though I resisted it, I think it made me better over the years too, to just that. But those things come like a melody would come to you. It's just you can't
Right.
really identify it. But yeah, that I mean I obviously a person that works well with words, so that's
Well,
just
yeah,
what
I
I
mean,
do.
as you do it over time, you get actually, and the same in music, like you get more verbose and you get more concise all at the same time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm the king of verbose writing because back in the day, I people wanted long bios, and nowadays everyone wants sort of shorter ones and that. So I always ask, "How long do you want it?" And a lot of people still want the long ones, but I'm saying I'll do it as long as you want. I tend to want to put every detail in, but sometimes I don't require that. But no one has the attention span. But 25 years ago, they apparently did. So that I've
absolutely.
had to adjust a little bit. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, they absolutely did. And then it would be, I remember my dad looking at some of the writings that the press people at the record companies had done about me, and he would look at those things as a copy editor, and he'd say, "Well, you're definitely not this, and you're definitely not that." And
yeah,
here's a misspelling, and this is way too
yeah,
long. But the printed word, and I guess now the digital word, is still
yeah.
a hugely powerful tool, because when people come to me through my mentoring program or whatever, and they want to become a recording artist, that's something that they don't really think of originally, is that there has to be a story. Like you have to write out your story, or someone has
Right.
to write your story in a way that it could be ready for publication. And I think that's a
Hmm.
lot of what you do, is you help people along making their story.
Right, exactly. It's just, I mean, I always kind of when I'm hired to write like a bio or a press release, it's always about telling their story the best. Sometimes I'll like it won't be an exact quote. A few times, like I get it about 99%, but like guys, like I remember when Huge Groove was upset that I didn't quote him perfectly, and he said I didn't say it. So sometimes they get a little testy about it, but most of the time, I usually I get it kind of right, and it's all in service of them. If I'm writing my own review, it's still there's still a thing where you're catering to something and writing reflecting on something, so it's always to it's I always try to like make it sound good, and sometimes I get sick of the adjectives. I sometimes go some girl was wanted to hire me. I knew that for something completely unrelated to music, but knew what I did. Started reading my stuff. She says, "You string more adjectives together in a single sentence than anyone I've ever known." And sometimes I look at the stuff I write. I go, I can't like I can't I don't like it. I was like, oh my god, it's like over the top. There's a tendency to
Right, right.
and then but what's good is sometimes if the person hiring me goes, why don't you tone it down a little bit, take it out, and you can adjust it. So everything's like a work in progress until a final draft. And I like that because then it keeps me from overstepping. It's not like I'm just always open to kind of solid editing. It's always a good thing.
That's so great, man. Well, there have to be some incredible stories about some of these interactions that you've had with basically the giants of jazz, and the giants all the way to the mid-level guys to the beginners. I mean, some of
Yeah.
the people that you've interviewed and worked with. Let's dive into one or two of those stories.
Well, do you want to hear positive things or I have the best stories are always the real bad ones, like the really bad, because those are the things you remember. You remember the anecdotes are, oh, and this guy was, I have a couple of those, but mostly, but I think the one I wanted to talk about first, obviously, because it's your contemporary, who was also a Nova recording artist back in the day, Brandon. And I was a big fan because he played with the Rippingtons at the time, and I was a huge fan. The first year I got into this music, I was crazy about it. And I sat with him at the baked potato, and I had a list of all these questions, and I went, "Can you tell me this?" Because I was so nervous about doing it. and once I did that first one, it was a Q&A, it was an LA jazz scene.
Ah,
It got really easy. And what I found was in this genre, the contemporary jazz, everybody was nice. It was like, God, and everybody was kind and supportive and liked what I did and made comments. I did this column in LA Jazz Scene, and people would talk about it and quote. So I felt like it was and I love the community aspect and stuff
right.
like that. So one thing kind of led to another. But the best stories though are, and then like with Music Connection, I had a really lovely, I got to do the Bee Gees in person. That was awesome. I got to go to Bob Hope's house to, with him and his wife in Toluca Lake in the 90s, you know, and they're still
Wow.
alive and old, but did that. And I talked to like Lionel Richie on the Fun Gloria Stefan, David Foster, great pop people that were like very big influences at the time. And it was just like, so everyone was just nice. It wasn't like pulling teeth. And another great one early on was when Basha was popular, and I loved Basha. Like she was vocally, that was like my favorite. And interviewing her in person was like a great thrill. And then and what's neat too is that guys like Boney James and Peter White, who became very, very popular in the genre, hugely popular. I was the first guy to interview them for anything, you know, and Boney was first starting because they were side guys. And I did that. And another nice thing is Paul Brown, who became that genre urban jazz's top producer, one of them. He said, well, the reason I started doing it is because when I came to you to say, can you write about me in Music Connection? They said, oh, he doesn't have enough credits. Because I think at the time he had only done like Sam Riney or something, maybe some engineering thing on a Luther Vandross, but it wasn't enough to write about. So it
Mhm.
just built. So that was kind of a neat thing. So Paul always said it was because of me that he developed his career. And I, you know, so I don't even know the influence you have, but I mean, every little bit helps. It's always nice. So, but again, the bad stories are the classics that you tell at the fun anecdotes that are just priceless. The good ones in this genre, though, your genre, everyone was pretty lovely. It was just really no one was like, you know, where I had a bad memory. I left and went, oh, that sucked. That was a terrible interview. So
You're
I'm
right.
lucky that
Well,
way.
the
Yeah,
there's
felt good.
something about the fresh air and the sunshine and the beach and the California
You
girl,
know?
and
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
there's some sort of a happiness that I think kind of lends itself to the whole
Yeah,
smooth jazz and contemporary jazz community. And you think about places not like New York or Oslo, where ECM Records is based, and you hear all this dark, really sad music coming out of there. And then for me, I would just think about Denver winters. I mean, it's like, oh my God, being in Denver in the winter just kicks my butt. I hate it so
well,
much.
I'm originally, as you see from the bio, from Chicago. We moved when I was 13, but yeah, I remember harsh winters, and that'll affect your environment, affects your creative process for sure. You know, no question. So
Well,
Southern California does help.
yeah, this is something I always, since now you're, so branched out and you do interviews and articles about everybody in every genre. I always thought that the really hardcore rock guys just seemed to be, for me, that was a weird area to try and fit into. Like I got a chance to be in Bruce Willis's band for a while, and there were some super hardcore rocker dudes in there, and they just would look at me before the gig like they were just gonna beat the crap out of me just for fun.
Yeah. But you know, it's interesting. Music Connection was great in the early days because they hooked me up with a lot of rock guys who I really grew up listening to, and I loved. And I had a chance, like for instance, the ones that weren't over the top like that because they were, you know, kind of became mainstream. Like I interviewed Styx, like in 1990 when Dennis DeYoung was still with them, and they were really nice. Him and James Young. And then the best one was because in high school I loved the High Infidelity album, the one that from REO Speedwagon. Going to Kevin Cronin's house in Encino to do this interview, and he literally sits in his grand piano and plays "Keep on Loving You." I said, "This is like." I mean, and that was 30 years ago, and that's like the best. Like, I mean, yeah, it's a song you heard on the radio, you know, some years ago, and all of a sudden this guy's playing it for you. He wrote this song, which was a worldwide hit, and it was just those are really the great moments. I mean, that's, you know, that make this all worth it. It's just fun. It's just like you just kind of go, God, it's like pinch yourself. Early on when he was still the Fresh Prince, I did at a photo studio like Will Smith, long before he was a huge movie star and whatever. He was just a rapper, TV guy. And it was kind of cool too, So that's it looks good on resume, and it's just kind of fun. But at the beginning, I was very impressed, and then later on, it just becomes a job. So it's like, okay, I interviewed Chick Corea, did a bio. I don't remember what he said. I did it like years ago, but it's still cool, man. Chick Corea. And then when he passed away, I was like, God, I got to talk to him once. I had a moment, an hour with him, which is it's fun to think about that because these guys really impact and change the world with their music. So
Well, yeah, it's just exciting because, by now, both you and I can look back over the years. I mean, me with 40 albums and you with thousands of
yeah,
write-ups and stuff. And, one thing I noticed that was super negative in many ways for musicians is that when the internet got invented and Napster came around, like none of us have ever recovered financially from that.
yeah, yeah.
Did you
I
find it
understand.
was in the writing world, was it kind of the same thing? Because I used to see these commercials where it would be a guy in a classroom with 300 people, and he would say, everyone is a top flight author today because of the internet.
Uh, Yeah, well, it did kind of relativize. I have a friend was a sports writer, and his business was hurt because of everyone's now a blogger. Everyone can post on this and that. Where in those days, so I think I started at a certain time, and you develop a reputation, and then you become the guy they want to do that. And there's a couple other contemporaries that started around the same time that have always had work, and it's the complimentary flow. Like he gets this guy, Scott Galloway is a great writer. He works a lot, and he does jazz and R&B and a million other things and tons of liner notes and stuff, but he's like we're on the same age. And I think we started at a certain time when you get in and you develop your reputation before everyone else is doing it. And
Uh,
because I started in smooth jazz and there weren't a lot of people writing so passionately, and so many people who were into straight ahead just didn't like it, I became the guy people would, hey, I can rely on Jonathan for a, probably like he's open minded towards a decent review because he sort of likes this music. He's not some straight ahead guy going, ugh, whatever. So that helped a lot, being positive and just going from thing to thing, and then delivering and being fast and efficient, and just getting better, all that. So and being personable, obviously, like talking to musicians and making it about conversations as opposed to kind of boring, just question and answers that just would it wasn't dry.
Absolutely. I've always,
Yeah.
I remember at KSBR a couple of years ago, I was on the Blake Aaron show, and I was down there getting my car worked on at that Mercedes dealership right by KSBR. So I coordinated a day to be down there, and I was on Blake's show, and they were saying, well, what advice do you have for young people? And this is pre-COVID, who want to get going in music and stuff. And I said, you have to leave your house. Like you can't plug in your Guitar Hero program and sit in your basement and smoke weed all
Yeah.
day and go up and have a bologna sandwich, and all of a sudden you're Joe
Yeah.
Satriani.
Yeah.
But
Most
you've
of the time
always been
that's
kind of
true.
out
Yeah.
there in the scene, and you
Yeah,
know,
I mean, I one of the things that was great back in those days is, I started in my 20s, and you have all this energy and you want to be out and going to free shows. Oh my God, it's like a kid in a candy. It was so exciting. And in those days, you remember Bon Appetit back in, of course, that, and then there was at my place and Lake Cafe especially, and just being able to go and hear these people play music, and because I was writing about it, I didn't have to pay a cover, and I didn't have any money at
uh,
the time, so it was very exciting. And then I
the
just got my
perks.
little drink. Yeah, no, it was really cool, and that started. And so I love to get and chit chat. Over the years, I stopped being so quiet. I still went out a lot, but I wasn't as like, I have to be the center of attention and chit chat with everybody. More laid back. But in those days, it was like really exciting because it was new and fresh, and I was really, the passion at the beginning was exciting. So that's why I would stay late because when you're 25, you have the energy to do that,
Right. And
and you
what
get,
was
it's
the
1 in the morning. Oh, it's fine. I know nothing to do.
difference?
I don't have a job. It's great.
No, exactly. It was a different era because
Yeah,
people weren't so paranoid, and the nightclubs were actually able to support themselves off of alcohol sales.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I remember when I lived in Huntington Beach, it was I don't know, 1995 or something, and one of my friends came into Kikuya, and he said, "This is the worst Fourth of July weekend I've ever had." And I said, "Why is that?" And he said, "I just got a ticket for drinking a beer in my yard with the fence closed." And I was
That's
like,
weird.
"Oh my god!" And so, whenever there's
Wow.
some sort of massive fear out there that
Yeah.
starts to take hold, and because you mentioned you used to go to people's houses for mentoring and things like that. And the internet made parents so terrified of anybody that was a stranger, and the vetting
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
everybody, and, the intense scrutiny of everybody that's on, your social media or at your job or at your workplace or at your church,
Hmm.
whatever. I think that's not really been a good thing for human society. Like, to me, I
Yeah.
think it's just not, it needs to be reined in, and they need to do
Yeah.
something about it. And I don't think it's going to happen because, especially now, as people stuck indoors with the virus, then
Yeah.
some of them are really depressed and really angry. I mean, how was I guess you can just keep on rolling and working, COVID or no COVID, right?
Well, here's the thing. I was surprised. I really wasn't sure when the lockdowns happened. Were musicians going to be continue to put out product and do this? It really, I still kept busy. Well, everyone was scrambling to figure out ways to share their music, and some of them did really great jobs. Like Michael Linkton did a thing which he converted into an album where he did these sessions. Rick Braun had sessions at his house. What a Mindy did. I mean, all these artists found ways to communicate with their fans, and I just was like taking it day by day, and all of a sudden I realized, oh my, yeah, people are still calling. Like and a lot of good projects came out of it. I was surprised though, because yeah, I mean, I was social distance before it was popular. I just worked for myself at home, and I didn't have to worry. But now it's like everybody's doing it. I was like, I no, I couldn't get a real job, so I just kept writing and it added up. And so I was ahead of the curve, but not by design, just by default, So but I mean, I get out. I don't do very many live interviews in the beginning. I loved running around and doing it. Now, if someone says that, I go, oh, it's not as convenient. I did get to do one cool thing though. When someone invited me to East West Studios, I wrote a bio for an independent singer, and she wanted to do for some promo interview stuff. I did a
Nice.
live interview with her, just where they shot it basically, and in a studio, and it was really a really cool thing. 'Cause I don't get to have that human, the live interaction the same way I used to and stuff. Because mostly because it's less convenient, and I don't have the time to schlep everywhere. But this was
Right.
a cool, unique thing, so I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the whole concept of Zoom interviews and all that is really one that's been super convenient. And
yeah,
I was a Skype music teacher for 9 years before Zoom got invented. And
yeah,
so, there's been a lot of opportunity to work with people all over the world and to keep everything
yeah,
rolling that way. But pandemic times for me was just like, great, I can upgrade all of my computer stuff. I'm going to get some new synthesizers.
yeah.
I'm gonna write more. I'm gonna work on organization of various things that I got going on in my life, and I've actually been pretty prolific through the
Yeah, that's good.
pandemic. But I just would like to get back to normal to where musicians can have gigs again all the time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's been mostly people getting back to that this past year, but then there's, because when all of a sudden the telos will shut down because of the Omicron thing, so they're a little concerned. Other places right now, everyone just is a little more concerned about being out, just because, whatever. Because obviously, even if you are vaccinated, you can still get the virus. It'll help you get from severe symptoms. But people don't want it. People don't.
Right,
They're afraid, and there's still this thing. It's going to take a long time, because I think it'll be with us to some degree for a long time, and the masks, and especially in LA, because we live in a place where it's, definitely there's always going to be these rules, because there's too many people here. So it's
right.
yeah, you have to do a lot of adjustment,
Well, if you were to, you know, be running like the Jonathan Widran School of young, uh, well-minded, talented journalists, what would you tell young people as far
uh,
as, if they wanted to go into a writing career? Because really, all I've heard
uh,
is it's really hard to make money. It's like kind of like being a straight-ahead jazz guy.
Yeah, you would have to, and you would know. Yeah, that's a hard question. I've always had. I just think that you know what I have said. I told people there's some websites that actually have work for hire, and to like Upwork and up something. There's a and they actually will hire, and you can submit samples to get work because you have to cultivate it.
Uh,
And but it just okay, like that kind of thing. You can sort of sign on. Although I tried it one time when things were slow, and no one ever responded because they want cheap too. That's the hard thing.
uh,
Um, as far as writing about music, I mean, I well, I like it'd be like the same thing. I started writing, get paid from LA Jazz, I just built a portfolio. Then came Jazzes, and just do it like start have another gig or a side thing if you can, but do
mhm,
it and just let one thing lead to another. But if you try
right.
to design it, unless you can get a regular job, which I thought would be cool, I thought it might be so nice to work for MCA Records or Warner's as a staff writer, but it didn't. There were opportunities, but nothing ever came of it. So it was just a matter of keeping doing it. Then calls came in, and once in a while, and I'd get on these mailing lists, and I would just write, "Hey, I know you know my work in Music Connection," and this is why I still stay in Music Connection because everyone knows it.
Right.
And then I'd say, "Did you know that I do bios and all that?" And by doing that one time, Luck Media, which was did jazz and a million other things and a lot of non-music stuff for like 15 years or well, at least 10, whatever. I had a gig where I was the regular writer, so just being contacting the people, but other times I've done that and you don't get any response. So just kind of being aggressive with that and targeting what you want, but just like start free. I mean, really, I don't like the whole idea of intern. I did a lot of Hollywood internships back in college time,
Uh,
but that's how it started. And I did it because I loved it. I had no idea I really make money at it. It wasn't really by design. It just sort of happened. It just because you just do it, but you have to start real basic and
right. Well,
see if it
that's
works.
that's just amazing that you've, parlayed your kind of freelancy young dreams into a such a uh,
Yeah.
verbal empire in a way. I mean,
Verbal empire. That's good. Okay, I like that
got
one.
a
Yeah.
verbal empire going on over there. So,
That goes on. That's gonna go on the tombstone. I like that. That's it. Verbal empire. The guy who did the verbal empire.
well, before we run out of time, tell everybody
Yeah.
about you have this really cool new blog website, and actually,
Yeah.
I've hired you to uh,
Yeah.
to put a couple of articles up about
Right.
my latest album is called This Way Up. It's album number 40, and when I thought about who do I want to have write about this that knows like my whole life story and realizes what an insane person I am. They could try and make sense out of my club show because basically
Yeah.
This Way Up is a club show or a festival gig. It's not,
Yeah.
it's got a little bit like the tune Freedom on there. Sounds like Miles on In a Silent Way, but most of the rest of it
Yeah.
is like hardcore party music played by
Yeah. It's good. I
really
love
good
it.
guys.
Yeah.
And then, I got a hold of you and you said, yeah, man, send over the music and stuff. So
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
you're doing your own website and blog
Yeah. It
freelance.
wasn't. It's not. It's in addition. It's complementary to what. It's what it is. Okay. For years, from say like 1999, 2000 to maybe 2011. I wrote regularly for All Music Guide, and those reviews are still out there, and it got me all over because those were syndicated everywhere. And in Wikipedia wants to write about an album, my name's on a lot of reviews. I even got an email thanking me for a review from Billboard, which I do not write for, from Donny Osmond because I wrote something nice about his album. So it got out there. I mean, it was like that was the coolest thing, right? From just whatever.
Johnny,
Donny Osmond wrote me an email.
awesome.
I that was the end of it. I didn't have to do anything more. That was the best thing. But anyway, um, so I'm on the tangent. I'm thinking about
No, we're just
that. Oh,
talking about
about the site.
KW
Anyway,
Vibe. I
so
mean,
I
your
wrote for
blog,
All
yeah.
Music for years, and then when they stopped doing freelance or said no more or whatever, I was like, well, I all I really had for some years after that was jazzes, which I worked more by assignment, and Music Connection here, and you can get a little review in. But there's so much need, especially with jazz and new age music, which is another specialty, or ambient, whatever, acoustic
Right.
music. that these couple of publicists, one in each of those genres, and I will say their names: Beth Hilton, who works in New Age, and Holly Cooper works in the jazz. They said, why don't you start a website? Why don't you start your own thing and come up with a name and do your own reviews and just offer just, basically like a nominal fee, whatever, and this and that just for your time. And so I did it, and I had no idea it was going to be like become such a thing. I have well over 1,000 reviews now, and some are live reviews and some are articles, and
Wow.
but over the last, like, I think it was almost not quite 4 years ago, and but it was because there was not, I didn't have the outlet where all music was kind of like and that actually has a much bigger reach than I can develop, but people still wanted something written somewhere, and this was an opportunity to do it. So I just started it, and just with Wix and like a very basic thing, it wasn't very fancy at all, but people wanted it, and then I put a video or a graphic or whatever, and somehow it just enough people knew about it, and I get emails from people all over the world that like, oh, I saw this thing, how much you charge, and can you write about this? I'm a pianist in Peru and I need this thing. And I'm like, okay, sure. And I've turned a few down recently, like someone had me write about a classical type singer in her shows. And I
Uh,
wrote about it well, but even though it's not my work, she's really good. But then somebody who's a friend of hers who's like a classical pianist, and I said, I've written very little about classical music. I love what you're doing. I like classical music, but I'm not knowledgeable enough. So I don't want to just do the, you know what I mean? So I have to
right.
really get the music. I have to feel like I can do it justice. But that, so it's sort of built into this thing, and it's a nice compliment to that. But I didn't know that it would be that way. Just people need reviews. They want things written. They want blurbs for their sites. And
Right.
again, you're just throwing it out there, and people kind of need stuff written, I guess.
Well,
So that's why I've done
I
okay.
know people that are in my fan base and in my audience that are recording artists and composers themselves will, um, be really happy to know that you're out there still doing this, and you can be reached directly
Yeah,
at
yeah,
jw5.com. The letter J, the letter W, VIBE.com. And
yeah.
there's a ton of, I go to your website just to see what new music's out there. You
That's good.
know?
What I get a kick out of too. I appreciate that. Is looking and seeing like where people are checking in from. They have like a map of the world, and you put the mouse over. Oh, there's one in Cambodia. Like, how? Like, okay, and there's one in Saudi Arabia, and there's 8 in Israel, and 200 in Japan, and then Australia. And I'm thinking that's so cool. So I can say, hey, I'm global, and
Yeah.
and it's not a lie. That's good.
Well, I mean, you definitely
Yeah.
are global, Jonathan, and you've done a great service to not only the jazz community, but to many other genres of music with your dedication and your positive attitude towards my
Thank
music
you.
and countless thousands of others. So, high five and big round of applause that you're out there and
Yeah.
still doing it, man. It's great.
Yeah, no, thank you, Rob. That's great, and I'm glad you're doing it too. And all the people that were doing it then, way back 30 some, are still doing it. No one's like, oh, what happened to so and so? Everyone, I mean, most of them, here and there you go, what
Except
happened to
for,
so and so, but
yeah,
most of you guys are still doing
except for the dead ones.
it. Yeah, they're right. When they die, they can't, So
Well, uh,
yeah,
all right,
a lot
man.
of
Well,
those.
listen,
Thank you.
I'll be
Yeah,
following you and following your
thank
excellent
you.
writing on the internet. And thanks
Thanks.
again for coming on the show. So this is Planet Mullins, season 3 debut episode. My guest has been author, jazz, and other genre author, Mr. Jonathan Widran. Take
Thank you.
care and make it a great day, everybody. And we'll see you on the
Thank
next
you.
show.
Okay, thanks, Rob.
Bye bye.